everybody, and a very warm welcome to the dock. This is our first event of 2018, and I just want to wish you all a very happy new year and thank you for your support this year, and hopefully our programme for 2018 will be as exciting and interesting, and we can count on your visits again. Tonight, we programmed tonight's event as part of the first Fortnight Festival, which is actually this year seemed to have gained an awful lot of traction in the media and a lot of publicity and interest. And the first Fortnight, I think, is an amazing festival which celebrates all sorts of issues to do with mental health and positivity and positive attitude really to talking about mental health issues which are so prevalent in Ireland at the moment, and it's something that maybe we don't talk enough about. So we're delighted to have two events here tonight, obviously, and then next Saturday we're having a conversation saloon, which is a relaxed kind of get-together where you talk about your hopes and ambitions for the next year. But I'm delighted that Brendan Harding is going to be here tonight. Brendan will be accompanied by Eleanor Shanley and John Feeley, who are two musicians who probably don't need introductions here. Thank you very much for your attendance, and I hope you enjoy tonight. Thank you.
My soul is on fire when I feel you by my side. When there's nowhere to run, nowhere to hide, that's when I need you, my angel. My angel, oh how I love you, my angel, oh how I need you, my angel.
Eleanor Shanley, John Feeley, thank you. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming. This is a presentation about symbols, to show how people use symbols and art to express what's going on in the unconscious, to express what they cannot articulate verbally. And I'm really privileged to have John and Eleanor joining me on this presentation. And a little aside, if you feel like applauding, if you could restrain yourself until the end, if you don't mind, because there's a lot of different little pieces to get through. I mentioned to you also that I'll be reading from my laptop, And that's not because I don't know what's going on, but I spent a lot of time condensing this material to get across some ideas that might be new to you, and as concisely as proper as I can, because if you go off it at all, you go into another area that needs a further explanation. So I'll do my best with it anyway. As we go through it, John and Eleanor will play some music that will honour the stories that I will tell. And I'm grateful to the people whose work you will see. They or their families have given me permission to use their material, and all the work that you see has appeared in a more clinical context in psychology journals. So to begin with, I'm going to give you a very brief outline of the psychology of Carl Jung, and in particular as it relates to the stories I'll describe. So Carl Gustav Jung was born in 1875 and died in 1961, and he began exploring his own unconscious as a young boy, mainly by using his dreams. Later he became a doctor and then a psychiatrist, and having worked with Freud for some years, he formed his own discipline of analytical psychology, as distinct from psychoanalysis. And he was a very learned individual who studied the art of humanity in many cultures and throughout history. And he drew his conclusions about how the psyche works from this research and from communications a lot with Erich Neumann and from the work he did on his own psyche. In particular, he studied how humanity throughout history has used symbols to speak of things they don't fully understand. The fairy tales of all cultures, for instance, and legends are basically the same, with the same themes, and they represent the journey of the human psyche. Hansel and Gretel going into the woods is about going into the unconscious to meet the wounded mother that we all encounter at some point. By the time he was 40, he had achieved a lot, but nevertheless at this time he had a kind of breakdown, and through it he grew immensely. He got a new understanding of human suffering because he suffered himself. So before we go any further, some music from John. And this is a piece from The Immigrant Song. I think that's the title of the song as well as the album, which he composed himself. So thank you, John. So this is a very brief outline of the psyche as Jung and Neumann saw it. This is the whole of the psyche, the personal, the conscious world and the unconscious. And the personal unconscious is what Jung called the shadow. Here are the parts of ourselves that we have not integrated, parts of ourselves we don't like, what we might call unhealed complexes. At the beginning of life, we're completely unconscious. We think that ourselves and our mother are the one person. And gradually by about age 1 or thereabouts, we realize that the finger I'm sucking belongs to myself. We're so close to our mothers that humans are considered to be still in the uterus until they're about 1 year old. So we become increasingly aware of ourselves, and this process continues until we may have formed a reasonable ego. I become something, a musician, a nurse, I get a blue car, I get married. And if we achieve our goals in life, or if we don't, we get to a place where we ask the question, is that all there is? This is what people sometimes call the midlife crisis, but it's a situation that can arise at any stage. John Lennon might be a good example, who achieved so much in the world and then began to question what life was all about. And so that's when we begin the real journey of life. The first half of life is to develop an ego with its associated personas. These are the masks that we wear when we're talking to different people. And the journey of the second half of life is the journey to the self, the real center of the psyche, the place where we can be at peace, where we can love less conditionally, and we have maybe a greater sense of service. We can connect temporarily with this experience, with a self-experience, perhaps when you have a child born, or a feeling of oneness with nature, which Jung would describe as a numinous experience, an experience of expansion, of being connected in a way in the world that's not just about yourself. In his work with patients and in his own explorations, Jung wrote that art expression and images found in dreams are helpful in recovering from psychological pain and emotional distress. And he often painted and drew himself, and he recognized that this activity was more than recreational. Art and images can be used, he wrote, to repair, restore, and heal. And one of the many essential things that he realized was that depression is usually caused by a wound in the unconscious, an unhappy, possibly frightening or demeaning experience, an experience of loss, and an event or situation that could have happened in infancy, childhood, adolescence, or adulthood. When people are depressed, if they can open their hearts and feel the real pain inside, they can heal themselves. They do this with a companion or friend or a therapist or through spiritual seeking. And in this context, depression is a growth process, not an illness. Using symbols in this process makes it more efficient and deeper. With regard to the collective unconscious, this is about a part of our psyche that has access to knowledge that we have acquired over our history as human beings. A baby knows how to walk. It knows because man has learned this over the ages. And we also have access to the meaning of symbols. Certain objects have carried meaning for people for many centuries. The forest means the unconscious. A butterfly symbolizes transformation from the caterpillar to the butterfly. And all of us have access to these, the meaning of these symbols at the unconscious level, not necessarily consciously, and you'll see in the stories we show you. Jung also highlighted the phenomenon of synchronicity, which is a connection between things that's nonlinear. It happens on its own, but it's connected in some intuitive way with something else. It's a connection outside our normal way of logical thinking. He discussed these ideas extensively with Wolfgang Pauli and contributed significantly to Pauli's ideas on quantum mechanics, for which Pauli won the Nobel Prize at the time. I have worked with clients using symbols for 25 years. And in the security of the inner work encounter, the confidentiality, the room or space, the presence of a large collection of objects, the desire of the person to find an answer to their pain, and a tray of sand in which clients can place the objects to make a picture, the unconscious is accessible and becomes active. Gerard Adler, a contemporary of Jung, wrote a book about the self, the dynamics of the self, the real center of the psyche. And he said it wants to become conscious. And this energy deep in your psyche wants to become more conscious. And to do so will push you into situations that may be difficult for you and cause suffering. The ideal is that the ego ends up in the service of the self. The self drives the ego rather than the ego being out there on its own. Sometimes self-realization is mistaken for ego realization. For instance, if I do a course that makes me more confident about things, that's good, it's useful, but it's about ego. If I was dealing with the self, I'd be saying, well, why are you lacking confidence? So it's in this environment the unconscious becomes active. What is truly amazing about the process is that Jung did all of this work on his own. The rest of us need someone who has been in that journey before to accompany us. So we'll have some more music, please.
This old house is falling down around my ears. I'm drowning in a river of my tears. When all my will has gone, you hold me swear. I need you at the dimming of the day. You pull me like the moon pulls on the tide. You know just where I keep my better side. What days have come to keep us far apart? A broken promise, soul, a broken heart. Now all the bunny birds have wheeled away. I need you at the dimming of the day. And come the night, you're the only one I want. And come the night, you could be my confidant. I see you on the street in company. Why don't you come and ease your mind with me? I'm living for the night we steal away. I need you at the dimming of the day. I need you at the dimming of the day. I need you at the dimming of the day.
Inside every man, there's an internalized woman, a feminine energy that's undeveloped, often rejected, and the same in a woman, an inner man or masculine energy. And Jung called this feminine energy in a man the anima, the Latin word for soul. And in a woman, the masculine form of this word, the animus, the internal masculine energy. These energies are unconscious, at least in early life, but when we fall in love, they become activated. And when we meet someone that is attractive to us, there is something about that person that gives us energy. They have a hook on which we project our unconscious feminine side, speaking from a male perspective. And so that through them, we're in contact with this unconscious energy in ourselves. We feel exhilarated. There's a new energy available to us, a new excitement about life. And the hook, the reason we project it, is often a psychological one. That person has a quality that connects us to our mother or father energy. This is a little model based on the kiss by Brancusi, suggesting two becoming one. If the relationship works out, we begin to own the projection. And the qualities we saw in the loved one become conscious in ourselves. And we need the other person less. We're less needy, but we start loving them in a more giving way. We may feel less in love, but we're acting at a different energy level than we first met them, and our psyche has become used to it. It's a bit like when someone who is depressed heals themselves by dealing with the wound in the unconscious, and they also feel energized and a new vigor for life, and this settles after a little while because they become used to it. This is a model of a cast of the hands of Elizabeth and Robert Browning, of their actual hands. It's a piece in the Metropolitan Museum in New York, and it would be often used to symbolize the connection between masculine and feminine, and also used to symbolize friendship. And it is the quality of relatedness that is more important in these relationships than physical attraction. This is some poetry from the Ascent of Mount Carmel by St. John of the Cross, a Spanish mystic, the person who developed started that phrase that you've heard, I'm sure, the dark night of the soul. And he used to speak about his longing for God as if he was the female lover of God. There he gave me his breast, there he taught me a sweet and loving presence, and I gave myself to him, keeping nothing back. There I promised to be his bride. And he's talking about a mystical union with God. And Jung spoke about John of the Cross, and so have many people, that this represented John of the Cross talking about his anima. He didn't, of course, know any of these terms or didn't think like that, but it just happened naturally.
If we were fine birds, my beloved, and the low star of evening was nigh, to the woods where no one could disturb us, we would go, my beloved and I, high above where the eagle is nesting, to where there's no cloud in the sky, through mountains, through hills, and through valleys, we would go, my beloved and I. We would go, my beloved, far, far away we would fly, loving and lovers forever. We would be, my beloved and I. Far away o'er the ocean we'd wander, on the edge of the gale we would lie, and there we'd be taking our rest, dear. We'd rest, my beloved and And we'd come back again to the nestings and up on the mountain so high we'd settle, and all through the springtime we would sing My Beloved and I. And the people below in the valley would envy us as they passed by, singing out from the peaks high above them our songs, My Beloved and
Maria was an executive level lady in her 50s with 2 children and a demanding job. On several occasions in the past, she had been hospitalized with severe depression. On one occasion, she had left home and was found by the police wandering along the highway, a few miles from home, not knowing where she was going. She felt this depression coming on again, and a friend of hers who had worked with me suggested she see me. At her first session, she talked about her family, how it had been for her when, as she put it, she fell apart, how things at work which were normally difficult became unbearable, and how intense these episodes were, how she suffered deeply, and the effect it had on her children and on her husband in particular. And then she created this image, and she said only one thing about it. She said, the Grim Reaper. Can you hear me okay? Very good. That's all she said. But in the images, her unconscious has spoken clearly, directly, and specifically. This is the same image, and I'm going to talk about the image symbolically. In the center is a bridge, a symbol of transformation. The bridge is a symbol of transformation, of crossing over, moving beyond the situation, moving to a higher state of consciousness. And at the back, there's a round tower. And a round tower is a place of protection. It's also, and safety. It's also a phallic symbol. And protection is an aspect of the masculine that's really important. If you've read the book, The Second Sex, you really get a sense of how vulnerable women have been and still are in a way just because of their physicality, and how particularly vulnerable they are when they're pregnant. On the bridge, there's a mermaid, and it looks like she's jumping into the water. Now, the water is a symbol of the unconscious. The ocean, 3/5 of the planet are covered with the ocean, and we all know its power, particularly recently when Eleanor was on the loose. But in the water, there's a wounded man, or a wounded person. We call him a man in this situation. And as I say, the water in all cultures has represented the unconscious. So we're looking at a picture here where there's a mermaid looking as if she's going to jump into the water to rescue this wounded man. Now, at her second session, you might say there that she has depicted her animus, the unconscious man who is wounded. Now, at her second session, Maria talked about her childhood. This is after the event. She, over the space of the next second and third sessions, she talked about her childhood. And when she was young, she suffered with urinary tract infections and spent a lot of time in hospital. And her experience of this was that she was a burden on her mother. Her mother didn't like her. I was useless, good at nothing. And she had never really acknowledged that before because she had a lot of shame around it. And as she moved into that experience, she realized that it wasn't herself maybe was the problem, that her relationship with her mother had something to do with this. And as she moved on, she said with surprise, you know, my mother was a battle axe. And as she admitted this to herself, she realized that her mother had not been quite fair to her father, and in fact had treated him quite badly, and without the respect that she now realized he deserved. So this is an important point about symbols that I just want to deal with in a little more detail. Because a lot of people will say, well, did you tell her this? Or how did she know this? And what's really important to understand is that she doesn't have to understand this in the way I've described it. The story has been told. It's no longer in there in the unconscious. It has been expressed in the conscious world in the language of the unconscious, which is symbols. And if she had come the next time and didn't talk about her childhood, just moved on to other things, the same effect would be on her. She would have been healed. She would have begun to feel better about all these things. But when she looks at it, when she has the courage to look at it fully in the face, if you like, to bring it to full consciousness, she's then very aware of the fact that she has an unconscious. She will see that she had she'd told the story in symbols to begin with. But she doesn't have to, and do we interpret the trays? No, because although I know quite a bit about symbols, I don't know what a particular symbol means for a particular person in a particular moment. So I don't know for certain what this is about at the time. Secondly, if I did know what it was about, and I tell this lady that your mother has been a problem in your life, then she may say, well, the reason I've had all these depressions is because my mother didn't love me properly. And so you don't want to force that on somebody. The psyche is very fragile, and you must be very respectful of it and not start telling people about how they are. It's up to the client to come to terms with these things. So, but this lady did have the courage to take this on fully consciously. And her mother was still alive. And in her fourth picture, she produces this. And it's as if, in consciousness, she has accepted this wounded part of herself. This is the mother image in herself. And she's accepted it. And there's a kind of air of forgiveness or compassion. So when she would get depressed, what was happening is the sense of the mother energy coming towards her as a young child is what bothered her. So in this picture, maybe 7, she has an oak tree, a symbol of the self, and the energy of the horses and the eagles. The white horse, if you've seen, is a symbol of the mother. And that came out also in the film Into the West, if you've seen it, where the white horse represented the spirit of the mother. The eagles are solar birds connected to the sun and positive masculine energy. And in her 9th and last picture, she has what we would call an image of the self, masculine and feminine united. And this we would see as the rescued, wounded man in the first tray. He's now on the bridge, he's alive again, and on a bridge suggesting further transformation. And from this piece, this lady's life took a different direction. She had dealt not only with the wounded mother piece in herself, but the wounded animus, the wounded masculine side of her, to which her mother had contributed. And her relationship with her husband improved dramatically, and she went out into the world in a way she had not thought possible.
My baby needs a shepherd, she's lost out on the hill. Too late I tried to call her when the night was cold and still, and I tell myself I'll find her, but I know I never will. My baby needs a shepherd, she's lost out on the hill. My baby needs an angel, she never learned to fly. She'll not reach sanctuary just by looking to the sky. And I guess I should have carried her, but I didn't even try. My baby needs an angel, she never learned to fly. soul, I know she'll have to go this one alone. 'Cause after all, that is the only way she's ever known. But there is no light in all this time that can chase away her shadow from the corners of my heart. I pray she rides a dolphin, but she's swimming with the shark. Out there where none can save her, not even no one desire. Tooraloo, to the cradle comes the crow. Tooraloo, my kingdom for a lullaby. My baby needs a mother to love her till the end. Up every rugged mountain, down every road that bends. Sometimes I hear her crying, I guess it's just the wind. My baby needs a mother to love her till the end.
Thank you. So we dealt with healing of the masculine side of a woman. This is healing of the anima, the feminine side of a man. Gordon was a 54-year-old mechanic. He needed emergency surgery for an obstructed intestine due to a tumour in the cecum, which is part of the large bowel beside the appendix. I removed the tumour with half of the large bowel, which is the operation for this condition. And in 2 weeks, when he had recovered from his surgery, he came to do some sandplay work. And he made this image. And in it, there's a boat and a church. And the boat suggests a journey. It's the place where he lived as a child, and it looks a bit bleak, as you can see. One of the regrets, very important regrets he had, was that he'd never had an education. You can see as he got into this process of image making that there's more energy. The cars represent a lot of energy, and there's a train there. And the boat is in the water now. But some weeks later, he made this image. He says that he trusted his wife and he felt very betrayed when This is a close-up. This is how I felt when my wife left me. Many a night I cried myself to sleep. And he's describing the loss of his anima. He has used this image as he talks about his wife leaving him. And he's lost contact with his own anima. And he's in pain. But this is the wonderful thing about symbols, that while it very accurately describes his anguish, the symbol is from the Day of Death culture in Mexico. And he knows about this unconsciously through the collective unconscious that we spoke about. He doesn't know it consciously, but it's there. And this symbol implies also resurrection. In Mexico, people have parties around the graveyards, and they dress up like this. And it's about a dance that reminds us of resurrection. As the weeks progressed, his images became richer, but he developed more pain in his tummy. And in consultation with the oncologist, I eventually had to operate on him. Myself and another consultant opened him up, and we found that the tumour had spread. And there was nothing we could do really, except to remove the section of his bowel that was almost obstructed and causing his pain. And after his second surgery, from which he recovered quite well, he came again and made this image. And he says, "It's myself and the girlfriend," his imaginary girlfriend, looking out at the sea. It's himself and his anima, if you like. The great unknown is before him, the empty sea, the unconscious, the great dissolving. And there's an air of kind of expectancy. Is something going to happen? And something does. An island appears. And this island has mostly on it wounded creatures. He gives a dream. I went to Labrador, and on the way back the boat sank. I lost all my money, but we were rescued by a helicopter and a boat. I felt great the next day. The boat took the cancer away. I had lots of dreams like that. I didn't make any money, but I got better. Cancer is in the path of life to strengthen you up for other things. Cancer has told me that grandchildren are important. When I think about the tray, it occupies my mind. And these are the characters. The Day of Death figure he used initially, another Day of Death figure, the Wicked Witch of the West, an angry caveman, Tin Man, who had no brain or heart. I was getting mixed up. Catwoman. So wounds in the unconscious are coming up, and he's attempting to deal with some of these unhealed complexes in himself on his journey to death. And this happens with many people who are in the dying process. They can deal with material that they haven't dealt with already. So it can be a very rich time for people. So he's afraid of them. And he's still resisting them, but there's a bridge connecting to that island now. These are the same characters, but there's a bridge. And here we have an Inca and a centurion. So he's still defending. And then he relents. He says, you can offer them food and you can give them wine. And he has creatively made, and the band, and he has made a band there. You can see these, there's a saxophone. There's several instruments there that you can't see, as well as the ones that you can see. And so he's being kind to this part of himself that he didn't initially like, didn't accept. He's being kind to his complexes, if you like. And all the food here in this context represents spiritual food. One of the times he came around this time, there was a Quaker hymn playing on the CD, and he liked it very much. And we'll play it for you in a minute. See, he's coming to greet these figures he was initially reluctant to meet. And in this image, they've been integrated. The Wicked Witch is here playing the bass. The Day of Death figures are there, yeah. And Straw Man is here, the Angry Man is here. These complexes have been accepted and integrated. And so, when that happened, he's gone a new sort of part of his journey. These negative images have gone. Some of them are buried under the sand in this picture. And it's like, I thought myself, he's going to meet the ancestors, the people who have gone before him. He says, you can work so hard at things that you don't need. I used to see people playing golf and think they were crazy. Now I think they're right. You should enjoy the simple things. There isn't anything in this world that comes your way that you're not given the strength to deal with. And these are courageous words from a man who is close to death. That's a close-up of, this is probably himself on the last part of his journey. And this is his last tray, just a week before he died. And it shows a woman in white arriving at the church that was there in his first tray. And we would see this figure as the figure you saw in the third tray, his anima, which had been so hurt, has been healed. And he's actually chosen a graduate to represent her. He's graduated on this journey where he did not maybe graduate in the academic world. So she's arrived at church, and we would see this as a kind of sacred marriage that John of the Cross was talking about, and that many, many clients make when they get to the end of a long process. they make images of a sacred marriage. And it all comes from alchemy, which I'm sure you've heard of, but was an activity that was well documented in the Middle Ages and which Jung brought back into our consciousness now. And this is the song that he liked.
My life goes on in endless song above earth's lamentations. I hear the real, the far of him, the tales on new creation. Through all the tumult and the strife, I hear its music ringing. It sounds an echo in my soul. How can I keep from singing? While though the tempest loudly roars, I hear the truth, it liveth. And though the darkness round me close, songs in the night it giveth. No storm can shake my inmost calm, while to this rock I'm clinging. Since love is Lord of heaven and earth, how can I keep from singing? When tyrants tremble in their fear and hear their death knell ringing, when friends rejoice both far and near, how can I keep from singing? In prison cell and dungeon vile, our thoughts to them are winging. When friends by shame are undefiled, how can I keep from singing?
We live and breathe in the power of the sun, our star, unconditionally giving, love personified. And when evening shadows fall, we see 1,000 stars. Have you any thoughts about this image? What do you think the person who created this worked at? He was a 51-year-old man and had surgery for a tumour in his bowel. At the time, I felt a single lesion in his liver. You examine the abdomen to make sure if there are any other secondaries or anything. And this was disappointing to find the single lesion. But however, the oncology team felt that it was operable. And so it was planned that he would have another operation to remove this lesion in his liver with the hope of curing him. So when he got over his first operation, he came to my office and he made this image. And he talked about his life as a hunter and a hunter's guide. He talked about his family, the death of a friend a few years previously in a hunting accident, and about his optimism for his upcoming surgery. And there was some sadness in the room at the end of the session, and I perhaps thought he was perhaps sad about his life. The fact that he had maybe been killing animals throughout his life. He said he had killed at least one moose every year since he was 17. And this was in contrast to myself, the doctor saving lives in inverted commas. This is what I thought he was thinking. 2 weeks later, during surgery, he died on the operating table. And he had been granted a painless end to his life as he had spent his time providing for the animals. And the picture shows a moose at the center of the tray. And native people all over the world have regarded hunting as a sacred activity. It's thought that the animals offer themselves for the good of the hunter. Part of life is giving your life for something else. On the left is a horseshoe, but the horseshoe is meant to be with the open end up to hold your luck. And on the right there's an owl, and we're familiar with the owl as a symbol of wisdom, the wise old owl. But in fact, the owl is mostly associated in most cultures with death. And to the right is a starfish, a symbol of healing. And a star is a symbol of love, unconditional love. And the sun is our star. It gives its light and warmth continuously and unconditionally. And it is no surprise that in many cultures, including our own, the sun has been thought of as a god. As a representative of what God might be, utterly powerful, totally giving, it's very appropriate. And then when night comes, we see 1,000 stars. And the starfish itself is a great healer. It can grow again from any wound. 6 months after these events, it was December. And I was looking at this image again and thinking about this man. And during the last 6 months, I had an unease in me every time I thought about him. I thought about how sanguine he was, how he spoke about how important it was, particularly as a guide, to make sure that the animal died painlessly. I thought about how in Newfoundland, every part of the moose is used afterwards, and for some poorer families it will represent a big part of the winter food supply. So moments of insight are moments when we see our own shadow. And what I began to see was that this man hadn't been thinking that his life wasn't as good as mine. That's what I had been thinking about myself. I felt I was better than him. And I realized that this wasn't true. And it's not really what you do or what your job is, but how you do it and whether you do it committedly or not. And hunters were around before physicians too. So I began to realize more deeply how privileged I was that people trusted me. And that evening in December 25 years ago, I was heading on an overnight flight to London, and it was snowing. And when we got above the clouds, William was still very much in my mind, and this realization I had. And I leaned forward in my seat and I looked out the window into the clear night sky with all those stars. And among those thousands of stars, I saw Orion, the hunter.
soon as we're here, we disappear like dragonflies. Their miracle blue can never tell you how it came to be. Each different kind, accidental, designed before you and me. Though we ask the whole of our lives, maybe there's no one. As soon as we're here, we disappear like dragonflies. How can something so fragile leave us helpless? We all feel helpless once in a while. How can something so fragile leave us humble? We all need humble once in a while. And now nature can sing such beautiful wings. Do you think of this? That each of us know in our hearts we must go. That's what beauty is. And just like the dream you were in, dissolved in the morning sky. As soon as we're here, we disappear like dragonflies. Something so fragile leave us helpless. We all feel helpless once in a while. How can something so fragile leave us humble? We all feel humble once in a while. And now nature can sing such beautiful wings. Do you think of this? That each of us know in our hearts we must go. That's what beauty is. And just like the dream you were in, dissolved in the morning sky. As soon as we're here, we disappear like dragonflies. As soon as we're here, we disappear like dragonflies. As soon as we're here, we disappear like dragonflies.
We're going to talk about a 20-year-old man called Joe, who arrived into the emergency room of the hospital I worked in on a Friday afternoon. I was asked to see him. He had abdominal pain, and the nurses told me that he had been neglecting his children and they'd been taken from him. And it turned out that he had been to the outpatients many times and to the emergency room many times as well in the past year. I examined him and I decided that he didn't have appendicitis, but I decided to admit him. And later that evening I go to his room to have a chat with him. And this is his story. That evening, and he came to see me to do some of this sound play work for a few sessions. And the story I tell you is a story that emerged in these sessions. And when he was about 3, his mother left the home. This is a big trauma for a child. After a year she came back, but after another year she left again. And his father then also left the home and he went into care. And then he went into a foster home. And the fostering didn't work out. And he went back to care. And then he went into another foster home. And the last foster home did work out. And he still felt grateful to these foster parents. But he got married kind of innocently when he was 17 to a lady who was very troubled herself. They had 3 children, 2 of whom had learning difficulties. So without going into the sad details, the mother couldn't cope. The children were taken from them and the marriage split up. Once when I was asked by some people around the hospital I worked with to work with an 8-year-old child to get him ready for fostering. He was in care. And during that time when I worked with the NHS social workers and child psychiatrists and psychologists, I asked them what happened to these children that they were looking after, children between the ages of maybe 6 and 10. And they told me that 1/3 of them would probably be okay. 1/3 of them would move on to the adult psychiatric services. And guess what would happen to the other third? They would end in prison, yeah. Now, these children hadn't chosen the upbringing they had. None of them were criminals. But when you endure trauma at an early stage in your life, your psyche is not quite as resilient as someone who doesn't have these traumas. So you're at a big disadvantage. And then when you get to age 17, it's difficult to live within the boundaries that society says you must live by. And so you act outside it. And what happens? You get sent. You have to be contained. And the way we do that at present is put people in prison. And maybe there's no other way to contain people like that, but when we do this, we ought to do it with respect. Because many of these people, we have failed them in childhood, and now we're going to punish them for our failure when they're older. So this man was a little bit like that. He had got on the wrong side of things, you know. But anyway, he came to my office, and this was his first tray. And you can see that there's a boat there. And as we've said before, a boat is about a journey. A boat is about taking control of your life in a way. The work of some people end up with the wheel of a ship or a boat to say, I'm ready for the journey again. And there's an image of a boat here, and you can see the backhand is a little bit longer than the other hand. It seemed so to me anyway, like he's stretching back to put his hand on the tiller. In his next tray, he had lots of boats. And kind of getting ready for the journey of life again, you might say. And over in the corner, there's a small lighthouse. And a lighthouse is a powerful symbol of guidance, you know. Can you imagine what it's like to be out on the rough seas in a hurricane and on the Atlantic, and you're waiting to find that lighthouse? It's so important. The difference between life and death. And in his next tray, all the boats have left. Perhaps this little canoe there represents his old life. And there's a bigger lighthouse here as well. And he relates this scene to a summer camp. He had met a person who was the head of the camp, and he'd established a very good relationship with him at a difficult time in his life. This man in this camp was really important to him. And so, if you like, he went on his merry way. He didn't come back to the hospital anymore. And I met him a year later. He was in great form and told me he was in a new relationship. And this is a good example of when the person has pain, emotional pain inside, that cannot find expression or cannot find a place to be heard, then it comes out in the body. And both Jung and Feeley, all those years ago when they were working together, said the psyche and the body are a continuum. And the scientists are all again repeating the same thing. The body and mind are one spectrum. So in celebration of this man's delight, we have a dance tune from John. And it's called Carolyn's Planks de Crilly, with John's own arrangement of it. Thank you, John. We're coming to the last song and the last little piece about Jung. And so we're going to share with you a special song and some pictures that I've taken a few years ago and a few synchronistic events that happened on a trip I took to Tanzania 3 years ago. The song is My Angel. It's available on iTunes, and all the proceeds go to the Laura Lee Hospice for Children. You might have seen it on the Ray D'Arcy show a few weeks ago. We'll come back to it. So here's an example of, I was walking along out on the plains in Tanzania, and I saw these ladies coming along, and I wanted to take their picture, but I had nothing to offer them in return. And so I just let go of it. And we were crossing a bridge. You can see the sign of it there. Bridge is a symbol of transformation. They smiled at me and asked me to take their picture. But on the first day that I was there, I assisted another surgeon to operate on a 3-month-old child called Zohan. And on the second, I'll come back to him, on the second day I arrived on the ward, I found a man who had been admitted during the night with 65% full thickness burns. And he was under a kind of browny blue blanket, a cage supporting it to keep it off his body. And it was kind of overwhelming to me. I kind of knew in theory what I should do, but I'd never done anything like that before. And in in Ireland, someone like that would go to a specialist burns unit to be handled by plastic surgeons. And one of the mainstays of treatment is fluids, and we started that, but I just didn't know what I was going to do. And 1 hour later, a plane arrived behind the hospital, a small plane, and in it was a plastic surgeon, Dr. Peter O'Doer from Kenya. And the two of us worked with that man for 3 or 4 days, but he did die, and that was not unexpected. But later that later that week, that little boy that we operated on the first day was not doing well, and I pushed to operate on him again. And I didn't know at the time that it's not usual to reoperate on someone who had not got over a first operation, because the support services are not good. But I sort of didn't know this, and we operated on the little boy together, 3 of us, and he had a leak in his bowel, and we removed that and sewed him up again, joined the bowel back together again, and he got better, and he left the hospital before I did. And when I was on my way home, for me it was one of the highlights of my time there in Tanzania that little kid got better, because it was like he needed some extra energy that wasn't normally available, and I provided that, or I thought I did, and I felt part of something bigger than myself. I happened to be there at the right time for that kid, and you might call that a minor numinous experience, an experience of being part of something bigger than yourself. And one final synchronistic event was that when I was back in Ireland 3 months later, I was looking at a short piece of video that I'd taken of the sisters working in Makyungu Hospital. And Eleanor recognized it. And she recognized it because she had recorded the song. These nuns were singing in Swahili. But Patrick Bergen had translated the song and had asked Eleanor to record it with him, which she did. And it's the song I'm talking about now. And so we're going to play that song for you again and show you some slides from Tanzania. And one last thing, I want to say sincere thanks to a few people, to Siobhan O'Malley for recommending this presentation to First Fortnight, and to First Fortnight for accepting it, to Sarah Searson, the manager of the dock, Keith Conroy on sound, thank you very much, Keith. To the people whose stories we've talked about, Gordon, who faced death with celebration, William, who showed me my own shadow in his quiet way, and Joe, who, despite the many setbacks he had, showed a lovely energy for living. And to the children I met on the plains of Tanzania, who asked me to photograph them. And last but not least, to the sisters who worked in that hospital in Tanzania, who we would consider as working from the self.
There's nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. That's when I need you, my angel.
My angel, oh how I love you, my angel. But I don't have wings, and I can't fly away with you, nor have I money to buy you things. but still I love you, my angel.
There's nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. That's when I need you, my angel. My angel. Oh, how I love you, my angel. My angel. I need you, my